If you're looking for ways to self-sabotage your NaNoWriMo efforts, if you're looking for an excuse to bail on this year's National Novel Writing Month, or if you want to be aware of the common pitfalls so you can avoid burning out in the middle of the month, then stay tuned, because today we're going to be talking about ways that you can make sure that you lose NaNoWriMo. Let's talk about it. Hello everyone, my name is David Webb and I made this channel to give you the best tips on writing and creativity so you can finally finish your book or have that creative career you've always dreamed of. I was going to make this video on how to win NaNoWriMo until I realized it's only the first week. If you're anything like most writers, things are going great for you right now. You are on a roll, you're feeling the momentum, and you feel like there's no way that you could lose. It's in these first few days that most people are going to be on track to win. They're going to be getting their 1,667 words down. No, it's usually not until the middle of the month that most writers sit back and come to the same conclusion that the computer did in war games.
The only winning move is not to play.
So why make a video that no one needs yet? No, today we're going to be talking about how to lose National Novel Writing Month. If you want to get ahead of the curve and quit while the quitting is good, or if you just want to say that you quit while it was still cool, here are some ways that you can make sure that you lose this year's National Novel Writing Month. Number one is going to be trying to write the perfect book. And sure, perfect can be a little bit of an overstatement. In reality, this can simply look like trying to write the best book possible on your first try. When in reality, put simply, you don't have time for that. Especially if you're not a seasoned writer or you're not used to writing every day, you don't really have the time to make sure that you're writing the best quality work. Not when you're trying to write more words in a day than you typically do in a week. No, if there were ever a time to focus on quantity instead of quality, it's now. As I talked about recently, the goal of National Novel Writing Month is not to write a book that you are going to query, that you're going to send out to agents, let alone something that you're going to publish immediately on Amazon. For most writers, NaNoWriMo is about getting into the habit of writing. It is about establishing a daily writing habit, or just getting used to writing. The newer of a writer you are, the more this holds true. The more you try to write a perfect book, the more you guarantee failure. The second way to make sure that you lose National Novel Writing Month is to approach each day without a plan. Ideally, you took some time in October or maybe even before to plan out National Novel Writing Month, to maybe even write an outline. If you didn't, it's kind of too late for that now. I mean, yeah, you could technically take a break in the middle of NaNoWriMo and try to go ahead and write that complete outline, but it's not going to be the same thing as if you had taken days to weeks to prepare in advance. But what you could do, and what I often do myself, is plan out the next scene the day before. After I get done with a writing session, I take a look at the next day and see what scene I'm going to write, and I go ahead and plan out the general bare bones structure of the scene if I haven't already. This doesn't have to be a lot. You could just write down the who, what, when, where, and why of the scene. But if you don't already have an outline, or if you haven't already planned out every scene, this can be a great way to remove roadblocks before they're an issue. The third way that you can make sure that you lose National Novel Writing Month is to just write whenever you have time. And yes, in theory, this sounds great. After all, when you're trying to write a certain amount of words every day, it's perfectly reasonable to write whenever you have time. Isn't it? Well, yes and no. This one is a little bit more of a matter of perspective. If you take the approach of writing whenever you have time, you put yourself in a position where you are waiting for the moment to strike. When you're waiting for some free time in between chores, tasks, hanging out with friends, you put yourself in a position where you may not get to write at all because that moment never came. And these days quickly add up, and before you know it, you're 15,000 words behind because on several days you just didn't have the time. Instead, the best way to combat this is to schedule your writing. This is maybe 3 videos in the last month that I've talked about this, but it is that important, especially during National Novel Writing Month. If you're not used to the writing habit, if you don't already write every day, there is no guarantee that you are going to be able to find a time to write. Instead, like with everything else that is important to you, you need to make time to do it. If you don't, this is one of the most surefire ways to lose NaNoWriMo. The fourth way to make sure you lose is to compete with other writers. Now hold on a second, isn't that the whole point, a competition? Well, again, yes and no. A lot of writers approach National Novel Writing Month as a competition with themselves. It's to see if they can overcome their busy schedule or their less productive habits, to see if they can finally write the book that they've always wanted to write. But yes, some writers strictly see it as a competition with other writers, to see who can finish NaNoWriMo and who can't. For this video, we're going to put aside the whole toxic nature that is comparison and competition. I talked about that recently in another video. But when your sole motivation for doing National Novel Writing Month is to best other writers, I personally believe that the results that you get out of NaNoWriMo are not going to be as good as if you had just done it to compete with yourself. When you compete with yourself, you are more naturally taking the perspective of self-improvement. You are literally trying to do better than what you think you can do. But when your only standard of improvement is your own progress bar being bigger than someone else's, do you really think that you can expect your end result to be any better than if you hadn't? Sure, at the end of the day, you might end up writing more than your fellow writer, and yeah, you might technically win NaNoWriMo and write 50,000 words, but when it's all said and done and you look back at your work in December, can you honestly tell yourself that you really won anything? I know this point flies in the face a little bit of what NaNoWriMo really is, because at the end of the day, it's really only about writing 50,000 words, regardless of the quality. But I did want to extend this challenge to all of you to approach NaNoWriMo more from the perspective of self-improvement rather than competition. The fifth way that you can make sure that you lose NaNoWriMo is to go it alone. This one is incredibly tempting to do because most writers by nature are introverted creatures. We like to work alone, we thrive on it, we do our best work when we're by ourselves. But that also means that we are incredibly susceptible to loneliness. I'm no psychology expert, but I would say that we are more prone to depression. And a large part of that stems from the fact that we do a lot of our work by ourselves. And while a lot of writers can just go through life and never talk to another writer, at some point a lot of writers run into burnout simply because they don't have any community. And when it comes to NaNoWriMo, because of the impending deadline, I'd say that it amplifies a lot of the problems that we face as writers, and that includes loneliness. So if you haven't already joined a community for National Novel Writing Month, I highly recommend doing so. It can be incredibly helpful to have a place to come back to, decompress, talk to other writers about what's going on in their book, what they're struggling with, to have a place where you all share a common struggle. That alone can relieve a lot of the stress that comes with writing, and especially with National Novel Writing Month. I'm actively growing a Discord right now, and we are getting right into the swing of things with NaNoWriMo, including weekly sprints on Thursdays and Saturdays so we can come together and write together. So if you want to be part of a writing community, go ahead and click the Discord link down in the description below. And finally, the sixth way to make sure that you lose National Novel Writing Month is to just skip a day every now and then. Seemingly innocent and ideally unproblematic, you wouldn't think that skipping one day is going to make that much of a difference. In fact, you could have written double the day before and just decided to give yourself a break the next day. This is a trap, and a deadly one. In a perfect world, if you're ahead and if you skip the next day and you don't drop below the word count, it shouldn't be a problem, right? Wrong. By skipping a day, you lose momentum. It's as simple as that. And the newer of a writer you are, the more true this is. If you're not used to writing every day, if you skip a day, it is going to be all too easy to keep this trend going. Even if you get back to writing the next day, it's going to be even easier down the line later in the month to go ahead and skip that day because you skipped one day earlier in the month and it worked out fine, right? These days add up, and they add up quickly. Even if you're ahead, I strongly recommend sitting down and just writing a few hundred words just to say you did. Because believe it or not, it has a much stronger impact than you realize. And what happens if later in the month you really do need that day off? What if you have a personal emergency or Thanksgiving dinner takes too long to cook? You could very well need a day off. And if you take one earlier in the month just because you're ahead, it could have disastrous effects down the line. And what happens if you're not ahead and you decide to take a day off? Because it can't be that big of a deal, right? That's even worse. 1,667 words is no small amount to someone who doesn't write a lot. And trust me, it is so tempting to figure out how many days there are left in November and divide 1,667 by that number to see just how much words you'll have to write every day to make up for it. But the more you take off, the easier it is to do again. And suddenly you find yourself going from 100 or so words that you have to write extra every day to a few thousand. Trust me, this is a very slippery slope and it can be incredibly hard to recover from. So if you're looking for a really great way to make sure that you lose National Novel Writing Month, just skip tomorrow. You'll be fine. And that's going to do it today for 6 of the best ways to make sure that you lose NaNoWriMo. Remember that none of these are guarantees. You can do all of these on this list and still manage to win. Not that I recommend it, but if you want to give yourself the best chances of winning, I highly recommend avoiding these 6 things. For all things writing, be sure to subscribe to this channel and click the bell so you can stay notified on all future content. My name is David Webb, and until next time, get some writing done.